Well, I just need licks.
Testing. Right, you can all hear me. Great, cool. So, guys, everyone's ready? So, welcome to the London Social Code, ladies and gentlemen. I want to start off by saying a big thank you for everyone that's attended this evening and everyone that's watching online from home. Being completely honest with you, I was slightly nervous as this is our first Social Code in London. It is also my first tech event that I've hosted. I wasn't sure how many people were going to turn up, but by the looks of things, we've got not a bad turnout. I'm pretty happy with the amount of people that turned up. Moving on, in regards to the Social Code, there'll be people here that have come to Social Codes before in person or may have come to our Social Codes before online. But together, in regards to what the Social Code is, it's a tech community where we invite everyone of all levels, all job titles, and all types of experiences to come in and feel comfortable and share knowledge. This can be from the latest technology that's coming out. This can be from good processes that you guys are doing well internally at your businesses. And ultimately, we want people to have fun. Come talk about tech, autonomy, and whatever you feel like you do. But we want it to be a safe space for everyone. Okay. Right, a little bit on me. I'm not trying to bore you to death here. I'll keep it as quick as possible. But my name's Anthony Jeppers, also known as AJ. I recruit within DevOps, cloud, IT support and infrastructure at Oscar Technology. I've been at Oscar now for 2 years, coming up to June, and I absolutely love it. I love Oscar. I love the fact that we can host events like this for you guys, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Right, without further ado, I would like to invite our first speaker on the stage, John Busby, the CTO at Twogether.
Awesome, thanks, Anthony. Thanks for that intro. I didn't realize you recruited DevOps, so you probably recruited some of the team that we're going to be talking about today, which is awesome. So yeah, great to be here, great to be in front of everyone. So if I fall over, just prop me up with a beer, and I will be fine. Really excited to run you through some of the stuff that I'm really going to take you through. So some of this is going to be learnings that we went through during 2020 and 2021. I promise I'm not going to use the P word or the C word, but yeah, really excited to see and irrespective of your company size, I'm hoping it's going to be valuable. So let's see if the slides work. Awesome. Right. I've named this talk Driving Developer Efficiency. Sounds really dull. Let's see if we make it a bit more interesting. Who's all these questions are ones, if you work in tech or development, you're going to have seen them at some point, right? You know, can you deploy on a Friday? That is insane. Like someone knocking on the door and coming and bothering you on a Friday at 3 p.m. to deploy your code. Like no one wants to hear it. Can we just do the security review like the client or the investor really wants to go through it? Like absolutely none of you want to have this. Like we just try and hide. We don't want to have to deal with it. So it's what I'm going to talk you through today is some of the changes we made in our business to get through this. But first, click on what's to work. Who am I? I've got a giant picture of me because that's what marketing team tell me to do. I'm the CTO of Twogether. We are B2B. Sorry, we're an award-winning B2B agency. I don't think Brad let me stand up here without saying that. We're an award-winning B2B marketing agency, which means a lot of the tech we do is got to be delivered super fast. Like we need to be technology agnostic. We've got to be super quick when we get stuff out there. I've personally spent 20 years building digital marketing, building enterprise tech for clients, and 15 of that has been through the accidental creation of our own SaaS product. So we actually created a SaaS product now back in 2008. Around that time, we're still running it now. It's in about its 6th iteration. And so, we have to deal with all of the problems I just mentioned on almost a daily basis. There we go. So let's talk about the roles that we will have to run in organizations. As a developer, we might be doing some product development. We might have to do some application security. We probably have to handle the deployments. We have to handle probably manage the cloud account. I was speaking to some of our speakers coming up later on. And you might be in an organization of 12 people and you have to wear all these different hats. So it's our day to day, it's really complex. On top of that, technology is now, I'm speaking to a room full of very young people, so none of this will make any sense. Like I started all the way over here with PHP 3, which makes me feel really, really old now. But technology is now way more complex. Like our stacks probably contain 5, 6, 7, 8 languages. And as I mentioned, we have to be technology agnostic. So we have to use, we might have to use Node one day. I'm trying to think of other stuff because I'm not allowed to develop anymore. We might use Node one day, PHP another day, .NET the next. Like we have to be flexible, and really all of us have to be polyglots. On top of that, all of the ways that we develop have changed. So we started back in the 70s. I'm not that old. We started back in the 70s with waterfall. Then there was XP in 2001. Now there's Scrum and Agile and scaling Agile. And in fact, there's even some new ones that I learned today that I'm very interested to hear about. So things have just become more complex. We've got to get our code out there, and we've got to get it out there quickly. So that way, yes. It's created the birth of this concept called stream-aligned teams. A team that's there to create value for a customer as safely and as quickly as possible, and as independently as possible. We really want to try and essentially just get stuff out the door as quickly and as safely as we can. And this creates in the enterprise space a bit of a divide. On the right-hand side here, we have security requirements and cost, especially in the agency space. And while on the left-hand side, we want to create customer value and innovation. It's a challenge to keep these two in balance. So typically, we would take some of those common functions. I'm going to talk about these functions in a moment. Function A, function B, function C, and to put them in a platform team that's aligned against that stream-aligned team. But really, what does a business value? How do you know what you need to break down into those individual items? How do you measure the return on investment of it? Those of you that are in, again, I was speaking to some of my fellow speakers here at the front, and they were talking about how they have to measure their return back to their investors. And so you might see a common equation like this, like what's the net gain versus our spend times 100? What's our return on investment? And it's really difficult to know what to put in that net gain. It's really difficult to know exactly how to measure it. And so today's talk, I'm hoping I'm going to take you through some of the ways that we learned to measure that when building out this platform team, and hopefully some of the ways that you can, some of the mechanisms you can use to prove the impact back to your business. So, what does a company value? The first thing, security. There's a lot of companies that are very good at security, but we've never heard of them. We only hear about the bad ones. So really, if your board probably care about security. We all know that if you have a data breach, you've got to report it to the ICO. You've got to go and tell your customers. There's probably a PECA or a GDPR or some element of fine that you then may need to pay. So security is an incredibly valuable item as a development team. Secondly, there's availability. If your application's not running, no one's going to use it. If your application's not there, they're not going to come back. They're not going to revisit you again. So it's super important, especially where we are in the marketing space, to always maintain availability. There's efficiency. If we're not doing things efficiently, or rather what we mean here is cost, then obviously that's going to cost more. It's going to cost the business more, and it's going to impact our profit. And finally, and I think this is finally, this is the one that I think makes it different from most DevOps organizations, which is we want to maintain a common infrastructure. We want to maintain some economies of scale across everything that we do. So all of these four together, security, availability, efficiency, and common infrastructure, how do you measure the impact you can make across all of them? So let's start with the easiest, availability. Like, what's the cost to your business of that downtime? Here at Together, I mentioned we run a few SaaS applications. We put them with 99.6% availability. That's when we had a team of 3 people working on it. Where that allowed us to be down over the entire weekend and still kind of somehow magically make the SLA. That isn't really acceptable nowadays. We've never been down over a weekend, by the way. But it's quite useful to use this formula over here on the right-hand side to understand exactly how much your downtime may be worth. So we use joy of a clicker. Is it that way? Which way do we point? Okay, so let's talk about. I've got a type on my slide. That's what happens when you do your slides at night after too much caffeine. So how do you calculate it? You take your annual product revenue and you divide it by time. So in this case, the amount of minutes that there may be in a particular year. So 5,225. Yeah, you can see the number. 529,600. So in this case, if your product is worth 20 million, that means it's roughly worth £38 a minute, right? So that puts a nice value on your downtime, but it really that's just one element of how you might look at this. When we start to look at how we measure our availability, we might also look at some of the other items that often get forgotten about when you're rapidly developing an application. So we look at maintenance of our some of our common platforms. All of our elements as an agency are either on Heroku or Kubernetes. So we look at things like DNS, any common items that we can maintain. We monitor the uptime across all of those sites, both internally and externally. And then one of the most important elements that we've added is we deploy user experience metrics. So that could be things like a new relic. We all know what it's like when you write a database query that works absolutely fine in staging, and then as soon as you add production data to it, it takes 2 minutes to load a page. And so it's important that our platform team measure not just server downtime, but those response times and report them back to the team. So we've talked about availability. Let's go on to the next easy one, efficiency, or rather this is cost, right? So if it costs more money to, if you're spending more money in your cloud instance, it's going to cost more money to deliver your product. And ultimately that's going to impact your bottom line. So this is going to be one of the easiest ones to think about. But it can get a little bit deeper than that. So when looking at ours, we not only try and optimize our cloud spend, which is an incredibly dull subject when we think about it, but something that everyone is looking into right now. And we optimize that against on-demand pricing. So we've got a good metric to compare against, making sure we're using things like our AWS RIs or our Azure or Google equivalents. But we also look to proactively propose projects that reduce that spend. So some of the items we've done is reducing the number of services we run. As a Streamline team, you always want to just deploy another Redis instance or create another Elasticsearch stack. And in the end, you end up with 50 different services that are incredibly complex to be able to maintain. And so coming back to that single stack that we run with Kubernetes and Heroku allows the platform team to be really focused, yet allows our development team to essentially to know, to be able to work in any technology. So we look at reducing not only the cost, but the number of services that we run across the board. That's the easy one. Now things get a little more complex. How do you put a value on security? Typically this presents itself in a few different ways in an organization. This can be quite often with us, where we're working with a lot of external providers and a lot of external clients. They want us to fill in these incredibly painful Excel sheets. I'm talking 300 rows of questions about what our single sign-on strategy is, whether our code's encrypted at rest. I'm getting sweaty thinking about it. And so that's a huge drag on that development team. To ask them to be filling those items in constantly. So rather than looking at that as an item for the dev team to handle, we look at security being something more of a revenue enabler for the rest of the organization. We took all of those requests, and again, we put them into the platform team. And that allows them to do things like justify filling in those against a revenue opportunity for that customer. It's not to say the customer wouldn't have signed if they wouldn't have filled it in, but it does just allow us to ensure that has a monetary value against it. Our platform team also maintain all of our ISO documentation. So we're ISO 27001 certified. We're just going through that process. In fact, the inspector was in today, apparently. So we're just going through that process again. It's worth doing, but it has to sit with a single team to be able to justify it. And that, again, is something that we can use as part of sales pitches, and we can use when we're speaking to customers. And finally, we wouldn't be talking about security if we weren't talking about proactive testing and resolution. We need to be testing these things. We need to be testing every application that's deployed, whether that's through DAST or container scanning or any mechanism that we use to get that out to production. And so what do those metrics look like when we deploy? So we've talked about completion of client questionnaires. We've talked about essentially what we call the ISMS log. Maintaining those, essentially maintaining the scripts that sit in our CI and CD platform to be able to test every project before it goes out to production, and enforcing that deployment policy. I think it's important that they're able to stop anything before it goes out, but it's all automated. There's no need for them for us to speak to a DevOps person and say, hey, can you deploy this? And then have a whole conversation back and forth. This can happen any day of the week, any time of the day. And finally, the team also coordinate penetration tests. Customers do ask us for them on a normally a yearly basis. And it's important for that to sit in one team so we can understand any common advantages across everything. So we've mentioned security, vulnerability scans. So what's left? As I mentioned, this is quite often the difference between, I would say, a DevOps organization and a platform team. We actually historically had a DevOps organization in Twogether. We were really proud of it. We were really proud of the fact that we ran all this infrastructure for our clients, and we delivered all this value. What we found is it was a massive bottleneck for us. And so how do you remove some of that bottleneck and still maintain your stream-aligned teams? And that's by finding ways to measure productivity. What's the way? What are the economy of scales that we can get to be able to measure productivity across the organization? And it's not just around maintaining the infrastructure, but around maintaining common libraries, common tools, actually building our own applications that make everyone faster. And so we measure that in a few different ways. We measure that by maintaining our CI and CD infrastructure that I've already mentioned, by maintaining that common infra, our GitLab instance, our AWS Glue for our data catalog, like all of those individual items they maintain so the teams don't get chewed up. But also by creating common libraries and applications. How many people here have to do time tracking? Like, I'm not seeing many hands. I know some of you do. I can see one over in the corner. Like, nobody likes it. So we built something to automate it for the dev team. That tool was actually so helpful, it rolled out across the whole company. So we have 250 people using a tool just to make us more productive. And really, the only way to measure that is through sentiment. The developers, is the entire company happy with the output that team's creating? We also look to measure reduction in onboarding time. We used to have this measured as, can someone deploy on their first day in the office? We actually now look at the 5th pull request, because that normally gives you a good average to know, are they up to speed? Of course, if you use other development mechanisms that we were talking about earlier, then that doesn't matter, but never mind. But so we use 5th pull request, which is normally a good measure of if they're productive. So in summary, hopefully this has given you a few things to think about. This has been a big change for us as an organization. We had to justify employing, this team is now 4 people across Twogether. We had to justify bringing them in. We had to justify building the team around them, moving some of the infrastructure across. But hopefully I've given you some food for thought here. The 4 ways that we measure it: security, are we able to turn security away from being a cost center to being a revenue enabler? Availability, making sure we measure and demonstrate that uptime to the rest of the organization. Efficiency, really, really easy. Just, are we saving money? Something that's going to become really important this year. And most importantly, and hardest to measure, are you making your developers more productive? Yeah, thank you very much. And it's been a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you, John. That was very insightful.
Does anyone have any questions?
Oh, yes, sorry, yeah. I've done
for John?
Yes.
I was just wondering, I mean, when you talked about in the productive infection, when you talked about reducing the onboarding time.
Yep.
I mean, my question is like, there are some tools and there are some solutions which would probably take like a much longer onboarding time, but then the merger net gain would essentially be a significant improvement in it, right?
Yep.
So how would you rationalize going through a larger process of like adopting a new system? I mean, in my case, it would be like an ERP system, for
Yep.
instance, like, which takes ages to transfer from like one to the other, and
So the question is, how do you measure across different projects? Like some could be shorter, some could be long. It's a really good question, actually. So we've always tried to target, keep our kind of units of work at about the same size, so that I'm not going to say we compare exactly one project to another, but if something takes that long, that's being in marketing, everything needs to be out quickly. So it's a really, really good question. I don't envy you dealing with ERP systems. That's I'm getting sweaty just thinking about it. But I would say, compare it against other team members. One of our most complex projects, we know it takes much longer to get up to speed. Normally, a big warning flag for us is they haven't actually been able to make any deployments in their first 2 weeks. Which is a comparison we use just for that one project. Other ones we expect to, other projects we expect developers to be up to speed much quicker. We also had a big policy around creating really detailed README files in each repo, so that if you could pick it up, you could deploy it really, really quickly. And we containerized everything, which again, you can only really do that if you have that central platform team that's able to do it across every organization. Awesome. Any other questions? Everyone just wants another beer. I know I do. So yeah, awesome. Back over to you, Anthony. Thank you.
So we're going to take a 7-minute break now, guys. So if anyone wants to pop for the loo, get another drink, we'll see you all back here in 10 minutes. Hello, testing. Hello, everybody. If we'd like to take our seats now, we do have more pizza ready for the next break, so don't worry. We won't run out of pizza. We've ordered way too much. LDS?
There it is. That's the only thing I was worried about.
We'll wait.
All right.
I'll sit over there. Right, let's begin. Inviting up onto the stage, Jack, the engineering lead from Zigzag.
Cheers, AJ. Thank you very much, and nice to be here. So it's the first time I've ever done a social code event. I'm really excited to be here. So thank you. And I know I've already said it to you, but thank you for setting the bar so high. You absolute prick. So what I'll be talking about today is the social side of social code. So I guess I'm a bit of a social meat in a tech sandwich of our speakers tonight. Yeah, I'll be talking about how we can use our soft skills, improve upon them, and use them to develop our career. So to give you a bit of background on me, I'm Jack. I'm also known as Steve-O, and I know the resemblance is uncanny, but not that Steve-O. Although I guess not too bad, not too far off. So yes, I'm the engineering lead at Zigzag. So we are a startup, about 12 people or so. We focus mainly on an app that's puppy training based. So if you've got a brand new puppy and you want to get access to training, expert support on 24/7 through a live chat feature, we're your guys. So that's what we do. I've been there for just coming up to over a year now. Recently brought all of the agency people that we had in-house and just focusing more on that, working closely with yourself, AJ. I know you placed our most recent guy, so big thank you for that. So yeah, so let's crack on. So
It's very
there we go. So I'll get this out the way nice and early. There is a minor audience participation. So I'm just going to pause and wait for people to panic a little bit. No, I think we're good. So I'm not going to be asking anybody to come up on stage. I'm not going to be getting anybody involved in that regard. I just may come up to you and ask you a couple of questions. If you don't want me to do that, use your soft skills to tell me by just crossing your arms when I let you know it's coming. There will be a slide coming up just before I'm going to be doing that. So just giving you that warning now. So what are soft skills? Very obvious question, but I think there's a lot of this goes under the radar a little bit. So we'll start off with the most basic, which is interpersonal. So this is just how you interact with people on a day-to-day basis. This could be just talking to people. This could be reading, writing, anything like that. Very top level we're looking at there. Following on from that, we have communication. So communication, again, is written communication, verbal communication, body language, how you use your eyes, how you use your hands, how you use your head, all that kind of thing. And the next two are kind of closely linked. So we've got listening and empathy. So it's not just about how you talk, it's also about how you listen. For me personally, as a leader in my role, this is probably the most important soft skill. You know, I need to take into account what my guys are telling me, whether it's from a technical standpoint, whether it's from a personal standpoint. I think when you're in a role where you have people relying on you and you're relying on them, that's a really important thing to focus on. But then you can get into some things that I think go really under the radar from a soft skills perspective. So you're looking at problem solving, you're looking at time management and things like that. But there's a little bit more to the story than just what they are, but it's also how we can use them. One of the big things to know is that they are really difficult to master. Now, a lot of people, I would say, you either have it or you don't have it with soft skills. There's definitely a switch that some people have, whether it's a confidence thing, whether it's a knowledge thing, but once you have a good grasp of social skills, it unlocks so many things in your life. And as I've pointed out there, they're very easy to know, but they're very difficult to master. And it has been scientifically proven, there was a study done by Harvard, that especially as you get higher up towards the exec level, C-suite level, success is based off of your soft skills more than your technical skills. They actually found out that there was an 85% weighting towards soft skills versus technical skills when you become more of a C-suite. So I know you said that you're kind of banned from coding. By the sounds of it, that's probably a good thing. But what's good to know with soft skills is they can be taught and we can improve them. So how can we improve our soft skills? When it comes to communication, the best thing I would suggest is to join teams and clubs. So if you're a young person, you're probably into gaming. So for me, like as a teenager, I was playing World of Warcraft a lot. So I was in guilds. That was a really good way to learn how to not talk to people and how to piss people off really quickly. But aside from that, yeah, join teams. So I'm into my football. So I've been playing football since I was about 6. So that's been a really good way for me to learn soft skills. Maybe get into volunteer work. You know, if you've got something that you're passionate about, whether it's the environment or anything along those lines, you know, join a volunteering club, get involved, meet people that maybe you wouldn't meet normally, understand how they work, and then you can adapt your way of communicating with them. And do what myself, John and Ollie are doing. Give presentations, come up in front of a bunch of people that you've never seen before and talk to them and hope that they find you interesting. If they don't, well, unlucky. Try and find a way of becoming more interesting. For leadership, I would say the best way to do this is to be hands-on and train your guys, get to know them, work on their hard skills, and that will in turn train your soft skills. So if you're working with a coder and they're working on maybe a language they're not familiar with or a framework they've not worked with before, but you have that knowledge, passing that knowledge on to somebody else is a really good way of learning how to communicate with them, but how to empathize with them as well. And also I would say from like a time management perspective, organizing a personal schedule. So this is the biggest mistake I made when I started running a team, is I would have meetings up the wazoo. I would come in of a morning, I'd have a meeting at 9, I'd have a meeting at 10, I'd have maybe 5 minutes with my team, I'd have another meeting, bin that off straight away, organize your head, organize your calendar, and you'll start to really improve your leadership skills there. Problem solving, I would say keep a running journal. So for me, and this is a really good one when it comes to negotiation, which I will talk about in terms of when you're maybe trying to progress at your current place. If you keep a running journal of what you're doing, what you've done, what you've achieved, what your team's achieved, not only does that help you understand problems you've faced and how you've resolved them, but it also might come in handy when you're talking to your boss about a pay rise. Worth noting. Obviously, play games, as I've mentioned. You'll not just meet people that you may not normally meet or interact with in a different way than you would normally, but you'll get put into scenarios that you know, you need to do a bit of problem solving to get through. and do brainstorming sessions with your colleagues. So workshops and the like, they're a really good way to improve your problem solving skills. And for empathy, I feel like this goes without saying, but a lot of people, I think, kind of jump the shark with empathy. It's all about listening. So if somebody comes to you with a problem, don't just talk over them. Don't override what they're saying. You let them talk, even if it's something that maybe is against you. A big part of being a leader is being able to take criticism on board, empathize with what the person is telling you, why they're telling you that, and then becoming better as a result. And that kind of follows on into the seeing it from a different perspective. You know, we've all been developers in the past. I know a lot of people here are developers, so we understand the development mindset, but maybe I don't understand from a marketing perspective, or maybe I don't understand from a product perspective why we need to approach this problem the way we need to do. And that's something that's really, really good to get under your belt. So here comes the audience participation warning. So remember what I said earlier about crossing your arms. If you don't want me to go anywhere near you, now's your chance. So body language. I would say that this is the most underrated soft skill because it's very easy to learn how to read and write and communicate and talk. This is not something that you can control very easily. This is really subconscious. So when somebody is talking to you, try to hold a more open posture. So if I came up to you, Ollie, for example, and you started talking to me, and I was sat like that, and you know, you're talking, and I'm just kind of sat here like this, and I'm not really that bothered, mate. You're really boring, actually. Do you know? I'm not really looking forward to this talk you're going to get. You know, you wouldn't like that, would you? If I was working for you, or you know, if you were coming to me as your manager, and that's how I responded, that's not very nice, is it? No, exactly. Use your head. So another thing as well, when somebody is talking to you, so AJ, you know, as you're here, mate.
I'm here.
You're here. Yeah, you ready? So if you just talk to me and you're telling me things and I'm just sat here and I'm like, okay, that's great. Yeah, I don't really care. I'm not really engaged with you, to be honest, actually. I'm going to look over there now. Oh, that's pretty, isn't it? It's actually really nice in this place. Again, not engaging, not interesting. If you're talking to me and you're giving me things that I feel comfortable with, I'll give you a little nod. I'll be like, yeah, that's great. That's really cool. That makes sense to me. Or if I'm not comfortable, I'll go, I'm not too sure. It's little cues like that from your body that can just soften or maybe improve the delivery of what it is you're trying to get across to somebody. Hands are for more than just twiddling thumbs. I realized as I wrote that sounds really dodgy. I promise that's not what I'm saying for you to do in front of any of your colleagues to, you know, twiddle your thumbs, so to speak. But as you know, as you saw with John, probably myself, you know, we're quite handsy people. I think I described when somebody put the lapel on me that I'm quite a movie person. I get a bit involved when I'm talking to people. So as you can see, I'm kind of waving. It just kind of creates a bit more of a personable approach. This is my favorite part of this because people get so uncomfortable. So it's all in the eyes. So hello, my friend. How are you doing? I'm just going to come right over to you. So if I just stare at you like this and I'm just talking to you and I'm just talking up to you and you find this uncomfortable. I don't know about you, mate. It's really uncomfortable for me. You find this uncomfortable? Yeah, I thought so. So obviously eye contact is a very important part of body language and we all know that, but you got to get the balance right. So don't just stare at somebody, but at the same time, don't just close your eyes at somebody. Try and do it in a natural way. You know, you want to look at somebody, you want to catch the eye a little bit, move around the room, and hopefully you don't creep anybody out like I just did there for sure. Cool. So speaking of reading the room, this is a really important thing. And it's something that especially if you're giving presentations, this is a really key skill. So first thing is being conscious of your tone. So you need to understand who you're talking to, who's here, why they're here, what they're here for, so that you can deliver the information you want to deliver, but in the right way that they will find it engaging. So for example, if I was in a group of slightly older, slightly more financial based people, I probably wouldn't have sworn or made any jokes. I would have just sat here like, and this is my talk on social skills. I hope you have a really good time. And the bar's over there. I know that's what you all care about. Whereas with you guys, it's a little bit more relaxed. I can be a little bit more myself, a little bit more open, just creates a nice feeling to what we're doing. Again, following on that choice of words. So again, like I said, I wouldn't be swearing, but I'm making sure that I pick my words wisely so that I can reach the line as I've put there, but I don't cross it. So this is going to be a good one. I know this is going to be recorded. I'll share this with my team later, but I have a member in my team who is very, very good at getting really close to the line in the sand, especially in front of the CEO of our company. Luckily, he's not crossed it just yet, but we're getting close. This is a really, really good thing to bear in mind. If you are one of those people who finds it easier to crack jokes, and that's part of how you deliver and how you want to get your information across, please know where the line in the sand is. don't make any jokes that you know is going to get you into trouble. Make sure that you deliver it in a way that is going to be accepted and received how you intend it. And firstly, and lastly, don't try too hard. So if you're trying to be somebody you're not, it's really, really easy to see. Like if you're not naturally funny, hello, don't try to be funny. It's not going to work. You know, people are going to know that. People are going to see through that. They're going to just find you a bit of a knob, to be honest. But at the same time, if you are a little bit stuffy and that's just how you are, just own it. You know, you need to make things work for you in the same way that other people need to make things work for them. And yes, you need to be adaptable and you need to adjust your delivery and your approach. But at the same time, part of soft skills is being aware of who you are and why you're doing what you're doing. And this is a really important thing. So just bear that in mind. So the meat of the presentation are the progression. So this is a really good one. If you're about to go into a salary negotiation, especially because everything's getting really expensive at the moment, soft skills will give you a really, really good leg up here when it comes to speaking to your boss or your boss's boss, or maybe the CFO or whoever is in charge of the budget or anything along those lines internally. So this is a really good way to be able to get a better opportunity where you are to improve your standing. However, if you happen to talk to AJ, for example, and you're like, oh, AJ, I'm not really happy where I am right now, and I'm kind of keeping an eye on the market. What are you thinking? If AJ thinks you're a knob, he's not going to make as much effort. Well, I mean, I'm sort of speaking on your behalf here, mate, but I know how you operate. We've worked together for a while now. Whereas if you're a nice person, you talk to him with respect. You don't call him names because he's a recruiter, which has been on the LinkedIn thing for a while now, as I'm sure you're aware. Recruiters get a bit of a rough time of it at the moment, which is totally unfounded. They're going to look after you better. So, you know, you treat people with respect, you treat people with decorum, they'll do the same to you. Obviously, better negotiation positions I've covered. Improved workplace environment. So like I said, the bloke I've got at my company likes to cross the line, but he creates a really good rapport with the rest of the team. He's like the glue that holds us together. His banter, I hate that word, but his banter really does open a lot of the team up to, you know, getting on with each other better, but also cross-functionally. You know, we have a lot of people in finance, for example, that, you know, are stereotypically a little bit more closed in, but you get him involved with them and they open up and they want to join in and they have a laugh. So it's a really, really good thing to have in your team. And if you can use a bit of that yourselves, that's obviously great. The best thing I think about having soft skills is you stop seeing people as colleagues and you start seeing them as friends. You know, I've got people that I've worked with for many different companies and I'm still in contact with them now. They come over for dinner. You know, we have nights out. You know, and when I'm working with them, when I was working with them, I wouldn't say, oh, this is my colleague, you know, so-and-so. I'd say, this is my mate. This is, you know, my friend. I've known him for ages, And, you know, work is no longer just about going in, getting a job done, taking your pay packet and going home. Important part of it, but not everything. And I think this is really key. And obviously what we're all here for tonight, a bit of networking. So fun there. So what if you're not confident? So this is what I was saying earlier about some people have just got it. Some people haven't. If you're one of those people who just doesn't feel confident talking to people, whether it's in this kind of setting, in a one-on-one setting, there are a couple of things that you can do to make your life a bit easier. So the first one is practice. So John, I believe you were saying just now that you joined a community of people that does almost public speaking as a practice sort of session. That's a perfect thing that you could do if you don't feel comfortable doing public speaking. If you're not comfortable talking to a colleague because, oh, you know, I don't want to annoy them, I don't want to upset them, maybe you should try and talk to them and have that conversation. You need to do those things to be able to understand how people operate and improve your skills. You need to give yourself time. So don't panic if something does come across wrong, or if you say something and somebody gets offended. Don't worry about it. It'll all smooth over. And with time, and the more you do things, the better you'll get. However, like I said, some people just don't have it naturally, and that's fine. Again, you know, we're all different and we all work in different ways. But if you take into account what we've gone through so far, I think you can see that being a natural doesn't really mean anything. And especially if you make sure that you work on what your limits are, but you also play to your strengths. So like I said, if you are funny, then that's a really good thing that you can use to help build that initial rapport. If you're not, then I would say probably don't try to be, focus on another part. If you're really like a nice, empathetic person, that can be the basis for your approach to people. And also ask for feedback. So not in a stand-up routine where you would give a joke and be like, did you guys find that funny? Oh, it would be more, you know, I know we had that conversation yesterday about so-and-so, you know, how did you think it went? Is there anything I could have done to make it a bit smoother for you? Anything like that. That's a really good way that you can learn a bit more about how you deliver without even being conscious of the fact that you're doing it. I know I had one recently with Patrick, the CEO of Zigzag, where we had a really good conversation about flexible working. And afterwards, we actually had a conversation the following day of like, how did you find the conversation went? I thought it went really well. Did you enjoy that? How do you think we could have made it better? And I really appreciated that. And it's something that I've taken from that. And I think it's a really good thing to implement going forwards. Lovely. Right. I'm going to end on a cheesy note, and I'm really sorry. I am. But the most important part of anything soft skill related is to just be yourself. I did not press that. Go back. Thank you. It's just be yourself. Like I was saying earlier, if you try and be something you're not, people are going to see through that. They're probably going to think you're a bit of a knobhead. Like, it's not going to give you any benefits. If anything, it's going to hold you back. Know who you are, own who you are. And that's the key to having really strong soft skills. And that's the really key to unlocking your potential going forwards. And as we say, I'm not quite as fancy as John's, but I hope you enjoyed. Thank you very much.
Round of applause for Jack, everybody. That was unbelievable. Does anyone have any questions for Jack?
Is he going to ask me what guild I was in? Okay.
You said about like some people have it, some people don't. Would you say that you naturally had it, or is it something that you like built on?
I would say that's a really good question, actually, because it's a bit of both. So especially when I was younger, like sort of mid to late teens, the awkward teens, I was terrible at talking to people, especially girls. And I've definitely, as I've got older and been more exposed to talking to people and being out in the working world, improved that. But I did find that just, I think around about 22, it just kind of clicked. And I was just, all of a sudden, I just knew who I was and what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be. And I kind of built on it from there. But I would say that, you know, it is a bit of a gray area and you can go from not having it to having it, but it's different for different people. So for me, I was, like I said, really heavily involved in football as a kid. And as I grew into adult football, and you go from just hanging around with, you know, people of your age to adults who will, they'll say some serious stuff, especially if you mess up. Like, I'm a goalkeeper. So if I dropped something, that was it. I was getting hammered. And that was a really good way for me to unlock that, that skill. And it's frustrating because I look back and I think, if I had that then, what I have now, then I could have done so much more. But yeah, that's what I would say is, if you feel like you don't have it now, that doesn't mean that you won't have it later. And that's what all of the practice and the thing can help you reach, maybe quicker than you would if you didn't do those things. Oh God, yes. Yes. That's a really good question. That's a really good question. So for me, I think it depends on what level the people that you work with are at. So if you're at the same level as people, I would say it's much easier to avoid that conflict of interest. So for me, as a leader, I have to draw a bit of a line between how I would say to somebody is a friend versus a colleague. And you have to put your management hat on when it comes to dealing with those things. So as much as I can say there is no bias, obviously, subconsciously, there's always going to be a bias. But the best thing that you can do is try to put that to the side as much as possible. If you find that difficult, then one thing I would recommend, and this has worked for me in the past, is try to be in your team. Especially if you're managing, they can be your colleagues. And then you can be friends with people that are in separate functions in your team, because you may not have that conflict of interest as much. And then once you've learned to have that kind of relationship there, that skill becomes transferable. And then you may be able to do that with your colleagues. Does that make sense? Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that's quite unavoidable, I would say. If you are one of those people that, you know, you can't help but be friends with people, and that's not a bad thing, that's really great. It's very difficult for me to be able to give you, there's not like a one size fits all answer for that, but you would need to try and figure out your best way of managing that conflict of interest. And it might just take a few different attempts at trying different things. That's all right. Yeah. 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 Yes. No, I agree. Again, like I say, it's a very good question. It's what I can't give you a one size obviously fits all answer, I'm afraid. Sorry. But yeah, I think the best thing I would say is try a different approaches, try and find one that suits you best. Obviously, different companies, like you say, have different like procedures around certain things. But I would just say for you in this situation, I would say just try to find the best approach that works for you. Obviously, I can talk to you about this after in a little bit more detail if you would like. I don't want to sort of spend too much time on it because I know that we got pizza and I am hungry. But yes, I would say for you, maybe a one size fits all option wouldn't be possible, but there's probably different approaches that we could try and think about that may help you. Yeah, any more questions? Oh, yeah.
Obviously, just be yourself. And I did a hobby called improvising, and that just unlocked everything. And you know, like so.
Yeah.
Follow the passions, probably saying, you know,
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point, actually. Yeah. Something I probably could have touched on there is actually a really good point is if you have a particular passion or something that you can take into a hobby and meet other people through, and that's another way of really being able to meet obviously like-minded people, which makes opening up and learning those soft skills a bit easier than maybe just throwing yourself into a group of people that maybe you don't have anything in common with. So yeah, that's really, really good. Thank you. Yes, you had a question. Yes.
I don't know if it's on the technical side or people side, but sometimes I find a sort of bit of interest, like, and how do you deal with this situation where the technical role, but you have managers or people that don't understand shit to technology.
I mean, I think we've all been there, yeah.
And so if you are a very technical skilled person, usually you need large time spans focus
Yes.
on big problems. But they struggle to understand this.
Mhm.
They want to have their availability.
Yeah.
And sometimes they don't understand shit. And they even ask you how to rephrase things and how to put things so they can
Yes.
start out about. How do you deal? What is your soft skill? How do you deal with this particular person? Okay, I need this large spanner, this availability, and this kind of things.
Yep.
Without hurting the relationship.
Yes.
Out about and tell guys, I can cope with this. It's not the right like this management things that is like for instance in Agile there is this two-task floating and this kind of things that usually don't work with it.
Yep.
For instance, software engineering.
Yep.
If you look at the best pieces of software, they are not done under Linux and this kind of things.
Yeah, but it's one bloke in a basement locked away to his own devices. Yeah, it's a really good question. So I am more of a technical person in my role, so I'm quite hands-on with the development, but I am basically the bridge as well between the guy who makes all the decisions and pays for everybody and the tech. So I'm actually really like used to dealing with that scenario. So for me, one of the things that I've kind of realized in myself is I'm just very blunt. So if my manager comes to me and says, oh, I need you in these meetings and I need you to do these calls and I need you to meet these clients. And I'm like, well, I can't do that. I've got this I need to be doing. And you've asked for me to have this finished. So if this is not going to if you need me here, then this is going to take a knock. So you need to then tell me which is the priority. And that's the kind of rapport that you may want to try and build is when they come to you with a problem, you then go back to them with the problem solution of, that's fine, but you need to understand that by me doing these things, these are going to be affected. If they don't understand that, then that's going to be an issue with them. And there's only so much that your soft skills can work on that with them. You can try as much as you might. They just, for want of a better word, might just not be smart enough to understand. And that's just their problem. You can try and teach them as much as possible. Yeah. If that problem occurs on a regular basis, find a new job. That is what that is. And as much as that's a joke, I would also say, so I've never had a manager above me that's technical. I've only ever worked for non-technical people that have then come to me and said, oh, I want this thing. Oh, it's just a button. Oh, can we not just quickly chuck that in there? that kind of thing. And so I've had that through my entire career, and I've, eventually dealt with it. But I have been at companies where I've tried to teach them, I get them involved in the process and show them why we do things and how we do things, and they just don't get it. And at that point is when I go, you're a bit of a lost cause. I can only do so much. You've clearly not watched my presentation on soft skills, and then I would look to move on. So I would say that, for you, and from what it sounds like, if they're doing it enough times where it becomes your problem, I would say at that point, you might want to, firstly, it's not your problem and it's not a problem with you. It's not a problem with what you're doing. If you're trying your best to get them to understand and you're trying to teach them and getting them involved, it is going to just sit with them, unfortunately. There's only so much you can do. And at that point, I would say, maybe interact with the rest of your team, see if they've got any ideas that may help, maybe get them involved in the process some more and try and get them to understand. But if they don't understand, and they never will understand, and there's a few people that are like that, unfortunately, there isn't a lot more that you can do. But if you try everything you can, then at least you can say that you've done that. Yeah, sure.
Surrounded by idiots.
Yes, great shout. Yes.
He wants things done quickly, fast, he doesn't care about the details. Tech is about blue, we're risk averse, see everything with different angles, make sure it's correct. And it's just a matter of seeing it from someone else's perspective. Maybe come up with some metrics to show that if you do this and that, then it will be impacted on income, return on investment, or whatever.
Yeah.
So having a little toolkit to back yourself up, it's always good.
That's a really good point. And actually, one thing just to follow on from that, if you're working for a company that has like a North Star metric, for example, or they have like a certain measurement that they rely on, that's the one that I would then recommend, that when you then say to your manager, oh, if we do this, that will get affected, that would be what I would focus on. So if your boss is saying, oh, we need to make sure that we have this many installs of our software by the end of the month, and then he's going, but I also need you to do this, 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 and this. If you then go back to him and say, well, I can be in all these things, but I'm also needed here to ensure that we hit this target. If you put it in business terms and make it in, basically you speak his language or that or her language, then that might help as well. But there will be times when you are going to be fighting a losing battle, I'm afraid. And there's not going to be there's not a one size fits all approach for, it's the one thing that tech people, I would say, struggle the most with is tech is easy to understand. You write a line of code, it executes a line of code. People are not like that. And that's the biggest difficulty that tech people have with people, I would say.
I think we have one more question.
You had a question?
Last question.
So is there any advice or tips you would give to us for those who want to dive into the deep ends? If we want to improve our soft skills and do presentations or give a talk or network like tonight, are there any tips or advice you would give to us? Anything to focus on?
Yeah, do it. That's it. If you want to throw yourself in the deep end, then get up on stage, talk to people, go to networking. That's it. There's no better way to practice and hone your skills than to just do it. And if you want to get thrown in the deep end, then come up on stage and talk. That's what I would suggest. If you want to ease yourself in, then that's where you would build yourself, put those building blocks in place. But if you want to just get stuck in, this is the perfect place for you to do that and the perfect platform for you to do that. Before I sit down and have some pizza, any more questions? Good, I'm going.
As Jack said, there's pizza, so we're going to have another 10-minute break. So if we could have you guys back in 10 minutes after you've eaten, gone to do, that'd be great. Speak to you soon. All right, so for our last speaker, I'd like to welcome up onto the stage, Ollie, the head of CRE at Eagle-Eye.
Hello. As AJ says, thank you, AJ. My name is Oliver Tappin. I'm the head of CRE, which stands for Customer Reliability Engineering, bit of a mouthful. And we'll get started. So this talk is basically taking the fundamentals and the understanding of something called SRE, which stands for Site Reliability Engineering. And the idea is that we want to take that mindset and we want to apply everything from that and start using that towards your own organizations and how you can use that to better yourself and your organization. So I've got a little agenda for you guys, what to expect. So we're going to go through an introduction, who I am, who I work for, the understanding of the actual SRE mindset itself, how you can then apply that to your organization, a quick summary, and then we can do a Q&A. So a little bit about me. As I said, who I am, Ollie, if you like. I started working for a company called Eagle-Eye Solutions about 6 or 7 years ago now. I was actually employed as a contract web developer at that time, writing a PHP code. I think it was back then, PHP 3 and all sorts. I think I started coding when I was about 8 years old. So that means that's been about 20 plus years of programming, which has taken me a little way. And the idea now is now I'm running a global department called CRE. And the idea of that is to focus primarily on the reliability of systems. Just before I go into what SRE is, just to kind of carry on the theme of SRE and CRE, Eagle-Eye Solutions, the company that I work for, we are an omni-channel retail business. We are the points master for a lot of the loyalty schemes around the world today. So you may have heard of Nectar Points, Tesco Club Card, Virgin Loyalty. If you go around the world, you've got places in Canada like Loblaws, and also in Australia, Woolworths, not the same as the one that used to be in the UK, but very large retail outlets. And they all have loyalty schemes and work around the world. Those are the kind of things where you would go to a till and you'd want to redeem your coupon or redeem your points. So all of these things everywhere needs to work and be extremely reliable. And what makes SRE really important to that is that we want to have a reliable service to make those systems work in the right way. So what SRE is it's site reliability engineering. And for those who know DevOps, probably more often than SRE, is that SRE is a principle that implements DevOps. So we're not necessarily kind of removing DevOps. What we're actually doing is we're taking the world of DevOps, so I'm DevOps over here, and developers over here. And usually what you get is this nice big brick wall in the middle. And developers will chuck over what they've built, and then DevOps get it and go, okay, great, thanks for that. And then have to go and run it. Whereas the idea of SRE is to break down that operational silo, break down those walls and start working together. So you have developer advocates that work with developers. You have people that are looking to create better ways of working with each other, better ways of delivering a service that's more reliable. So some of the fundamentals and core principles of SRE are what you can see here, and we'll go through them. Embracing risk. This is something that we find all the time, and very similar to what Jack was talking about with sort of soft skills and understanding people. There's something called flow in psychology, where the idea of that is to give people what they need in their jobs in order to do the best with what they can do. And part of that is allowing them to have this psychological safety so that they can do what they need to do in their job. And they have the ability then to embrace the risk and deliver more things and better things. If you give someone a safety net to work with, they won't feel like they are limiting themselves and they're going to fall over and cause issues. If that safety net is there and they can embrace that risk, then everyone's a winner. Service level objectives. This is where we go into the detail of what SRE actually is and what it means. We'll go into more detail about this, but this is kind of the kind of secret sauce of what makes SRE and how we will utilize service level objectives to ensure that you are running a reliable service. The next one is eliminating toil. Toil is something that I think that we use as a word all the time, but it's essentially anything and everything that isn't like a deliverable project. It's something that's going to get in your way. It could be technical debt. It could be something that comes in from an alert through on-call teams. It could be all sorts. And the idea of that is we want to get rid of it because we want to focus on driving the business forwards. We want to focus on delivering that reliable service. We don't want to be woken up at 3 a.m. We want to be working on the fun things like, I don't know what developers enjoy these days, creating a Kubernetes cluster or something like that. Next one is blameless postmortems. This is really, really important to the SRE mindset. This is giving you an idea that you can get things wrong. We're all human. And you can actually sit down as a group and work out what went wrong, not putting a blame on a single person, not putting blame on a service or a team or something like that, and actually understanding where the issues were so that you can work together and that you can work out how you can make things better next time. Monitoring. I think obviously saw something earlier about New Relic. I think monitoring observability platforms, they're great. There's a very fundamental difference between alerting and monitoring. What you can generally find is that by looking through your monitoring, you can work out when issues are about to occur. And we see this time and time again. If there's an alert that's gone on at 3 in the morning because of something gone down, you've caused issues, chances are, if you go have a look, you probably would have seen it coming if you actually looked through your monitoring systems properly. So monitoring is really important and monitoring the right things. Automation. So kind of taking everything that we just talked about, automation is the kind of key part in making sure that you have done something with what you've learnt. And I think with engineers as they are, both site reliability engineers, developers, DevOps, the idea is that you don't want to have to be putting fires out all the time. You don't want to put your fireman's hat on. You don't want to be getting rid of the issue and working on the next one. You want to make sure that that issue that's come in or that issue that's happened has been dealt with and it's gone once and for all. And you're not just helping yourself, you're helping the next person who then has to potentially deal with that. And simplicity, I think this comes up time again as well, is we make things too complicated a lot of the time. And keeping things simple is key in making sure that we can do all of these things properly. So, as I said, we're going to talk about the parts of SRE. We mentioned SLOs, we'll go into that in a minute. What makes this from the very beginning, if we sort of start from the bottom, is an SLI, also known as a service level indicator. This is a measurable metric, essentially, a quantifiable measure of service reliability. So this could be something like response times. This could be something like the number of seconds that an event was sent to a client from when it was issued. It could be something like the availability. It could be anything, but we'll get into what's more important, how we can build things around this. But an SLI is essentially a metric. The next part is service level objective. Service level objective is essentially a target or a like a top and a bottom of where you want to be in the middle using your SLI. So let's say, for example, you have your SLI, which is response times. Your SLO might be you want to make sure that it's between 50 and 150 milliseconds. So with that in mind, who actually cares about this stuff? I think what's important about this. If we go the next level up, what you all may have heard of is something called an SLA. That is a service level agreement. Now, the issue that we have a lot of the time is that, or we see quite a few times, is that organizations generally focus on the SLA because that's what's been agreed, that's what's been contracted. And chances are, if you breach that, you're going to have to pay a financial penalty, which isn't good news for anyone. So the idea of using SLOs is that you have an ability to understand whether you're going to breach that or whether you've already breached it before you even get into your SLA territory. And that is helping you, it's helping your customers, it's helping you understand where you're at, it's helping your customers understand where you're going to be before you've even breached a contract. So going back to who actually cares about that stuff, users and customers. Customers are users who pay for a service that you're providing. So if we go back to the idea of reliability, who cares whether that service is reliable? It's going to be the people who are actually paying for that. And if we go back to the idea of an SLA, it's going to be the customers that you're reimbursing if that service isn't reliable. So it's important to understand actually who your users are. For each service that you run, you need an SLO. You absolutely need one. The reason being, as I've just said, before you reach your SLA territory, it's going to help you with the financial side and the contract side. But not only that, is that you have then a mutual understanding between yourself and your customer about what that service is going to provide and how reliable it is. This kind of goes without saying, really. The most important feature, I think, was mentioned in one of the other talks. Reliability is really, really important for what you're going to be delivering. If you don't have a service that's reliable, no one is going to want to use it. I think we've all been there before, where something's up and down, flapping all the time, and you're not sure whether to use it, and you just give up and go away somewhere. Classic one is looking at bounce rates of websites. If they take too long to load, you're going to get bored, go back and go to another website that's going to give you the same thing. And the same thing happens with organizations. If you have a service that you're providing to someone that it's not great, they're going to go and look for business elsewhere. So it's really, really important. The other thing to add to this is there's a really good kind of equation that people use sometimes, which explains reliability, and it's customer anxiety. And what you generally find is reliability over 1 is customer anxiety. So the more reliable your service is, the less anxious your customers are going to be. So if we take this beautiful diagram that I put together about 3 in the morning in a hotel room somewhere, the idea is to kind of explain over here where you have your SLA and kind of taking the bits that we've spoken about in terms of SLOs and where you want to be. Now, what this kind of shows is 2 things. One is your SLO in terms of where you would like to be, your SLA, which is where you want to stay away from, because you don't want to pay that money to give money back because you provided a really bad service. But this also shows something quite interesting, which might not be as obvious as it first seems. And that is whether you are providing a service that is too reliable. Now, that sounds really interesting. If you provided a service to someone and you charged them a certain amount for that service, and that service was only so reliable, but they expected it to be more reliable than it should be, then they're going to start using it for things that probably they shouldn't. And what that will end up doing is that will end up creating your happy customer into a very unhappy customer very, very quickly. So what's important to note is that you can have a service that is too reliable. And what we'll get into from that is something called error budgets. And this is one of the fundamentals of SRE, and kind of just taking one of these kind of mindset changes. This is all about mindset more than anything else. And it's taking something that in your SLO and going, okay, let's say I want to be 95% available. If you're 100% available for the month, you essentially have a budget of 5% to play with. So what that means is that you then have an acceptable level of service that you've provided to your customers, that you've promised them, and you've got something left over that you can play with and deal with. So what should we spend our error budget on? Really, really good question. Kind of things that you can spend your error budget on will be things like risky deployments, planned downtime, anything essentially that you're going to do that could cause downtime. And this is kind of a really key point where you could take a service that you have, you want to upgrade it, let's say, and you can make a really good decision, a business decision, an engineering decision, to understand whether you can actually afford to do something risky. And if we go back to the core principles about embracing risk, this allows you to do that. So if you take your service and you've not made it too reliable, and you've made it as reliable as you've told your customers, and it's more reliable than you said it's going to be, you've got a budget to play with. And that allows you to do these amazing things. And that's what will give your engineers, your developers, and other people that work within your organization to embrace that risk and start delivering more. And I think this is where other organizations fall down, in that they try and do too much at one time, and they end up creating more problems than they're actually trying to solve. So some really good examples of this. I'll just double check which the next slide is. Some really good examples, and actually this one goes in quite nicely, is if you were to use a service, let's say one of these circles in here is something that's not very good and you need to swap that out. What the customer can actually see is is kind of nothing. They see a black box. They're just using your service. If you're a SaaS business or if you're providing an API or something like that, they don't care what happens behind the scenes. They don't know what happens behind the scenes. You do. That's great. That will make you anxious in terms of what's being held on by a thread and what's being put together with a bit of paper mache and shoved in the corner somewhere. But the client doesn't care about that. What they care about is whether they have a service that they can use. So all of those things that are kind of held together by string, you can start swapping and changing them and using your error budget to start strengthening things as your company and your organization grows. So, and this is a really, really good point in terms of understanding where people are and where people get caught up, is they sit and go, okay, oh, I'm really annoyed that this like coding standard over here is not using PSR 12 when we were using PSR 2 beforehand, right? Customer doesn't care about that. It might help your internal teams later on, but the customer ultimately is using a service. And the difference between DevOps that focuses really on kind of releases and what you're providing to the customer in terms of the product, SRE focuses primarily on reliability. Going through the examples, the 5 nines is a really nice one. And I love this because you get executives who sit in business meetings every day going, 100% reliability is what I want. 100% is almost always going to be the wrong metric to use, almost always. And if we just take a look at this table here, this shows you the difference of essentially a downtime that you're going to receive depending on the number of nines that you expect for a service to have. And we're talking, if we look at the difference between an entire year between 5 nines and 4 nines, the difference there is 46 minutes in a whole year. I'm pretty sure I've had showers longer than that. What's important to note here is that those 46 minutes, depending on what you're providing, and I think John mentioned this earlier, is that 9 that you're adding to your service that you want to add, or your executives are telling you to add, is it actually worth 46 minutes? And you can do the calculations of working out how many transactions per second you're doing if you're running a SaaS business that gets money from transactions. Those 46 minutes might cost you 20 grand in loss of revenue. But the infrastructure required to create that extra 9 might be within the hundreds of thousands. So there's no point in adding that extra 9 if you absolutely do not need it. And this goes back to the understanding of you can create a service that's too reliable. You can spend, and I've seen the bills that we have in Google Cloud, you can spend millions and millions and millions on infrastructure to create a reliable service. The question is those millions that you're spending, are you getting millions back from your customers from that service that you're providing? Maybe, maybe not. Another really good example of this is multi-cloud. If you have a service that's extra reliable, let's say your internal service is really, really good, you are relying on third parties to provide a service to you as well. And they have contractual SLAs that work with you. And what you want to do is you kind of want to work out, okay, our service is this reliable? The services that we're getting from Cloudflare, from Google Cloud, from all of these other places that we're using, all these other third parties, what SLAs do they have? What are they sticking to? What SLOs have they got? What are they trying to aim towards? Are we promising that, or are we promising more? Because if you're promising more and you're spending the money for more of that, then you're wasting your money. Because this has happened to us, it absolutely has, is that something like Google Cloud goes down. And you go, oh, okay, that service that we made really, really reliable is now not reliable, not through fault of us, but through fault of something else. Again, blameless postmortems. Something else has gone wrong. You can't help that. But those number of hours and those number of minutes there, is that really worth spending 3 times your infrastructure cost to create a multi-cloud environment in Azure, AWS, and somewhere else to make sure that you're covered? Maybe not. Maybe it is. If we look at something like DNS, another really good example, actual DNS name servers that are provided by some very, very big names do not even have 5 nines. So taking Cloudflare, for example, they offer 4 nines. And this is actually recent DNS performance statistics from DNS Perf. And this shows the actual reliability of some of these name servers from these DNS providers. Google Cloud 99.98, you know, it just gets worse and worse. I think Cloudflare was the absolute top one there. There's nothing higher than that. And that's just not good enough, really, for some of the people that are expecting 100% reliability, not good enough for some of the services that maybe you're expecting, if you're expecting to be running on 5 nines. So you have to think and ask yourself, in terms of the wider understanding of what you're delivering and what you're doing, is it actually worth spending that money on that extra 9? Open source. So this is a really kind of key understanding that I think everyone knows, everyone has dealt with at some point within their career. In Eagle Eye, we're actually going through a shift of trying to change our on-call teams to a 24/7 model, where we have teams working in Australia, Toronto, the US, the UK, and other places. So we're essentially getting a 24/7 coverage around the clock. And as part of that transition, we're finding some issues, some teething issues, naturally. And part of that is around communication. Communication, ways of working, little things like if you have a meeting with your team, or if you have a training session, you have to think, okay, we're going to have to record that because the guys in Australia aren't going to be awake to watch it. So it's this idea of collaborating and understanding. And I've had many conversations with executives to understand, okay, so how are we going to deliver this model? And it's actually staring us right in the face, and it has been for a long time. If you think of things like handovers, why? Why do we have handovers? We try and talk to the next person and talk to the next person, and talk to the next, and it just gets lost in translation. Whereas if we look at the fundamentals of what happens in the open source world, we're already working with people around the world. We're already collaborating. We're already working together. We're doing peer-to-peer programming, all through things like GitHub, GitLab, and other parts. It's all doable. We've all done it. Maybe we should take some of those fundamentals and those understandings and apply that to our organizations. So what this is really is all of the stuff that we've just talked about is trying to get that mindset shift and trying to take some of these learnings that are around us today that we probably know inside out, especially with the open source example, and applying that towards your business so that you can change your mindset and make your life so much easier. This is a really good quote. And I think going back to the simplicity part, and someone mentioned to me earlier that in engineering, we have this thing called KISS, which stands for keep it simple, stupid. And it really does come back to bite you sometimes when you've made something more complicated, or you've over-engineered a solution and you realize that actually you've just made things a lot worse. And if we take the learnings of SRE and just go to the simple understanding that everything needs an SLO, everything that you do, you can make better by using things like error budgets. Everything that you're trying to deliver is from a focus on the customer lens, then you're going to make things so much more simple. The idea really is, again, that simplicity of trying to take where you want to go and what you want to do, and all of those beautiful goals, but really trying to keep it realistic as well. So the world's between fantasy and reality, and trying to get some sort of nice, sweet medium in the middle to understand what you can do, what you can deliver. So going back to those 5 nines, that's probably fantasy world there. Whereas if you look at reality and you try and go, okay, I want to set an OKR so that we can make ourselves a little bit better. Great, do that, but make it realistic. And this is a really good kind of visualization on understanding what you think you probably should do versus what people think you should do. And chances are you only need to do a very, very small thing to change that mindset shift almost. To really change some fundamental parts in your organization. So in summary, I think the really, really important parts to take from this, if there is anything that you can take from this, is focusing on what the customer cares about. Going back to that diagram, that really complex diagram of all those shapes and sizes and everything else that could be held on by a thread, other services that have had probably too much money spent into them, other things that are, like I said, living in the office on the side, plugged in, that says a little thing on the plug that says, do not switch off, which I'm sure we've all seen, is if it works, it works. If you need a more reliable service for that, work on that, but focus on what your customer cares about. The next one is consider whether that next 9 is really, really worth doing. So going back to those examples of DNS perf, actual examples that we use today, having a look and seeing what your cloud provider has actually provided to you. Forget what they've promised, but actually look and see what they've delivered. Is it better or worse than what you're promising your clients? If so, you might need to adjust that reality and have that conversation with your clients. Integrating open source best practices, going to my 24-hour example, everything that happens in the open source world is a great example of how we can work collaboratively, how we can work around the world, and how we can make progress in many areas. I'm sure every single one of us has used an open source technology, whether we're using it within our business, whether we've developed one or contributed towards one ourselves. It works really, really well. Take some of those learnings and apply it towards your business. And the last one, be realistic and keep it simple. CRE is all about taking site reliability engineering and applying it towards your customers. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Yes, so that was really interesting. A lot of theory. I thought maybe there was 2 areas that we could give some examples to just to help me to understand it better. So the first one is, I've never heard of a place where people said this has got too much uptime. So, an example of where too much uptime, when it's about error that you mentioned, would be really interesting. The second example of this, is I think that's a really great insight about open source, because it is true. Like in the open source world, things just work in a way that they don't in our companies. I don't know why that is. A good few examples of why that might be would be really interesting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first question is around taking the examples of things like uptime, and you don't get the kind of communication from clients saying that's too reliable. Yeah, absolutely. You won't get that from people because they're getting something from you for free, essentially. The idea really is to think about it on a different kind of way, which is how much money are you spending on that service? So although you won't get something to say that's too reliable, you'll get an executive going, why are we spending 200 grand on this service that we're only getting 50? And that's the difference there, is understanding how you can make the most of services that you're delivering and working, and it's sort of taking some ideas from FinOps, some ideas from like what your CFO would talk to you about, is trying to make something as efficient as possible and making it work in the right way. And there's another part to that, which is what you're actually promising your customers. So if you're taking a good example, a real example of this is in Eagle Eye, we provide a service called Message at Till. And that service relied on a piece of technology that originally was basically a single node, because it was only used for, at the time, a very small service that we didn't really have to rely on. And the difference is that once this service was created and we started utilizing this technology for that service, we realized very quickly that that one node is not going to be reliable enough for the feature that we are now delivering. And this is a feature that would be implemented on Till's real time. So it wasn't something that could be retried. It's something that would have to work. So our little one node Elasticsearch, whatever it was at that point, had to be beefed up. So although at the time we could have kept that and gone, yeah, there you go, your feature's delivered. If we then start going down as a result of not investing that money into that service and not making it as reliable as it should have been, then the customer's going to start shouting at us. On the flip side, it can work the other way. If we have a service that's too reliable, then, and we found this before, is that customers end up relying on that particular thing or that particular feature too often. A really good example of this, another real example, is a database cluster. So if you have a database cluster that you're trying to scale horizontally, you might implement things like proxy SQL over the top of that, and you might start using your real-time slaves to send queries to. Now, within a host group of proxy SQL, you might say, okay, this data that's coming in, that's okay to be 10 seconds delayed. Now, if you've not told the customer about this, we've seen this before, where if someone creates something and they immediately do a get after, that gets going to return a 404 if it's 10 seconds delayed. So you're relying on a service that was extremely reliable at the time, but as you horizontally scale things and you're not telling your customers or you're providing too much reliability in something, then they're going to start relying on that to be really, really good when maybe later on it's not going to be. So I hope that answers your first question.
Yeah.
The second one, remind me again, that was.
It's an interesting insight. Practice. You mentioned the open source practices. Can you give some examples specifically of which practices?
Yeah, of course. So this question is about taking open source and actually applying it to your organization and some examples of that. A really good example I've seen in Monzo, I've seen in Atom Bank and some other places where they've taken the idea of open source. So things like collaborative programming. So I remember they were taking things like pull requests and taking them and allowing other teams to actually review code rather than it being done over like Zoom or in person. And the idea of that fundamental kind of change meant that when they moved from an office space, when they were working together, and when COVID hit and everything else went down, is that they could immediately carry on with how they were working currently compared to actually changing the way that they were working. Very similar to different regions that are working. So when you say the US wakes up and you start handing things over, if you're working in a way that already allows you to collaboratively communicate with each other, so if you're making comments on tickets and you say, I've got this far with it, can you carry on? Then someone else can pick it up. If you work in a way where you are doing a change and you leave it and you go, I'll pick it up tomorrow, then you're not working collaboratively in the same way as you would open source. And the way open source works is that you have people that contribute and that they're essentially volunteers. So someone might only have time to do a couple of hours worth of work on something. Someone else might be able to put in 10 hours and you add all these hours together and people contribute to create what we know as this open source project. And it's a similar way that you can deliver these projects using those initiatives to work around the clock, work with other people, make sure that everything is centralized and understood and that you can get the information from the same place. Contribution guidelines, readmes. I think someone was saying that you don't need to have a handover to do something. You can have a readme that works really, really well. A really good example is if you go online and you want to use a library, you don't have to talk to that person or go on the phone and have a handover. You read the readme and you go, I can use it like this, and I can use it for my use case like that. If you could take that fundamental of readmes, ways of working, contribution guidelines, and all of those kind of things, that is going to help you move forwards and spend less time with handovers, less time in meetings, and you can just crack on.
They don't focus on the face stuff and the processes make it more efficient.
Yes. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry. Sorry guys, we have slightly overrun a little bit. What we're planning to do is go to a pub around the corner called the Millers. So any questions, Jack loves that. Any questions you may have for our three wonderful speakers, please follow us to the Millers if you guys would like to join us, because we need to sort of get ourselves out of here and start clearing up. But before we go, we do have some prizes. So if you guys would like to check the bottom of your chair, if you've got a post-it note on there, you've won a wireless mouse. Anyone with a post-it note? Post-it note, sticky note, under your chairs, look under your chairs. Yeah, you've got one, you've got one. There should be two, You've got one. And two. Congratulations, guys. You've won yourself a wireless mouse. There you go. Round of applause. There you go. Yeah. There you go. There you go. Wonderful. Just quickly, sorry guys, just quickly before everyone leaves, I just want to say a massive thank you for you all turning up tonight. I thoroughly enjoyed myself and I hope you guys had too. I want to say a big thank you to marketing as well. If you'd like to turn around and give them a big massive clap, Lauren and Lani. A massive clap to my manager Jasmine. She's helped me massively with getting this event together as well. And lastly, a massive clap to you guys. And I hope to see you guys at the next event. If anyone's seen the speakers tonight and would be interested in speaking at one of our future events, obviously I'm Anthony Jeff is on LinkedIn. Please reach out and we'd love to have you guys speakers at our next event. Go. Right.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thanks. Cheers. Really interesting. It's